ये रहा है, लेकिन दूसरी तिमाही में टाटा स्टील ने जबरदस्त नतीजे पेश किए हैं। कंपनी के मुनाफे में 8 गुने का उछाल आया है। हालांकि नतीजों के बाद आज शेयर पर ऊपरी स्तरों से मुनाफा वसूली का प्रेशर है और अब करीब 1.5% नीचे ये ट्रेड कर रहा है। लेकिन नतीजों के बाद हमारे मैनेजिंग एडिटर निखिल डालमिया ने कंपनी के सीईओ और एमडी टीवी नरेंद्रन से डिमांड आउटलुक और कीमतों को लेकर बातचीत की। आइए सुनते हैं।
To talk about the quarterly performance and how things could transpire for the steel sector, it gives me great pleasure now to bring on board Mr. TV Narendran, CEO of Tata Steel. Mr. Narendran, fantastic to have you on ET Now. Thank you for joining us. Before I get into specifics, let's talk about the big picture for the quarter gone by. If I look at the sequential comparison, a year-on-year comparison, the realizations, the purple patch for the steel sector continues.
Yeah, Nikunj, thanks for having me on the show. Yes, I think we are in a good place as far as the industry is concerned from a demand perspective, with multiple governments across the world focusing on infrastructure, including our government in India. Second part is the costs are on the higher side given the input costs at record levels. And thirdly, China, despite a bit of a slowdown, is not exporting much, because they're cutting production month on month. So overall, the sector is in a good place.
So specifically, once talks about the challenges for the current quarter. We've seen a wild swing, sir, in coke prices, especially how China is cutting down on the capacity. We've seen a lot of volatility in the iron ore prices. So what happens to the steel prices given that the raw material prices are fluctuating so wildly?
Yeah. So yes, there is volatility in steel prices. Even if you look at the steel prices in the last 3 to 4 months in Southeast Asia, the hot rolled coil prices fluctuated between $850 and $950, went up and down twice, right? So to me, there is that volatility because of raw material prices. But even today, the raw material prices are at a high level. So coking coal prices for Indian importers are in the $380 to $400 range. And for China, it is in the $550 to $600 range. So when you're buying coal at that price, it is very difficult to sell steel at much cheaper prices than is available today. So I think that's the big change. Second thing is iron ore prices have dropped, but seems to have stabilized around $100. And third point is because China is cutting production. In fact, every month, Chinese steel production is lower than the previous month's production. And this is expected to continue, and China is not going to be exporting a lot of steel. That gives a lot more stability to global trade in steel, and hence steel prices have stayed at a higher level than we've seen in the last 10 years.
So can I say that one is volatility, which obviously will happen after the last 1 year price appreciation. But in terms of a directional trend, steel prices, in your understanding, will remain firm. They may remain volatile, 5%, 10%. That's nature of the cycle. But directionally, prices are headed higher.
So what we've guided is this quarter, for instance, in India, prices will be about 2,500 rupees higher than last quarter, our realizations. And in Europe, it will be about 25 to 30 or 35 pounds per ton higher. So also because we have long-term contracts both in India and in Europe with segments like the auto industry where prices are being renegotiated. So that is one thing. Secondly, as auto industry demand picks up, it helps us in the mix. So for multiple reasons, we expect realizations to be trending up for this quarter as well.
There is finally good news coming from Europe. That, in a sense, has been the swing factor. If I scan through what updates have come from brokerage reports, our understanding of your number is that Europe has been the swing factor. Is this normalization of demand which has helped the European business?
So Europe, if you look at it, Q1, everyone was disappointed because in Europe, Tata Steel Europe has a larger proportion of long-term contracts than most of its peers because we are a very strong player in both the auto and the packaging industry. So as a consequence, we were not able to see the benefits of rapidly increasing prices in Q1. But as the contracts got renegotiated, as we started, also getting better prices from the spot markets, you see the improvement. So the European EBITDA is actually doubled in Q2 compared to Q1 and is expected to stay strong for the rest of the year.
But for the quarter gone by, would you say that the domestic demand per se was not very satisfactory?
You mean domestic demand in India?
Domestic demand in India, that's right, for Tata Steel India business.
Yeah. So normally the July-September quarter is the weakest quarter for demand in any year because it's a monsoon time and construction activity slows down, and construction accounts for 60% of the steel consumption in the country, right? So this quarter was no different. But what happens normally, it is typically a strong quarter for the auto industry because you're preparing for the festivals and the offtake, etc. This time was not a great quarter for the auto industry because of the semiconductor issues for the passenger cars, and commercial vehicles were slow to pick up. But we are seeing in the last few weeks that the commercial vehicles business is picking up, which is good for steel because the steel intensity in commercial vehicles is much higher than in passenger vehicles. So overall, we are expecting the next 2 quarters to be better from a demand perspective in India. But otherwise, Q2 demand in India shrunk by about 2.5% compared to Q1.
And do you see that normalizing? Like you said, I mean, do you see that whatever you've lost in Q1 would actually be more than made up in next 2 quarters?
Yes, in terms of volume, yes, to a large extent, we will make up. We will still be a little bit short because of Q1, but overall, for instance, Q3 volumes in India will be flat compared to Q2. In Europe, will be better than Q2. In fact, Europe Q3 volumes are expected to be closer to the Q1 volumes. Overall, for the year, we had given a guidance of volumes much higher than last year. I think 1.5 to 2 million tons will be in that range.
So one has to understand, let's say, at EBITDA level, sir, because the India standalone business now also includes the BSL business. So what happens to the India business post the BSL merger?
So what happens is post BSL merger, the Meramandali site, which is the Angul site of Bhushan, becomes like another site for us. Just like we have Jamshedpur and Kalinganagar, you have a third site. And so it becomes an integrated part of the Tata Steel ecosystem, which is good in one way because we've just had some amendments in the MMDR Act, and which means you pay a higher royalty even if it's a wholly owned subsidiary. So this way, when you merge it, then it's part of our existing enterprise. So there is in some sense, a leakage which we will avoid. So, and it also drives greater efficiency from multiple synergistic point of view because there are many synergies that we've already driven as different legal entities, and when you make it one, there are many efficiencies that we can drive as one enterprise. So this was part of the plan. It took us a bit longer than we thought because obviously we had to go through the approval process at the NCLT level. So we've got all that, and now we are ready to go ahead.
Your cash flow generation is still strong, and your debt reduction, something which you've outlaid, is an ongoing process. But looking at your optimism on steel cycle and your operating leverage benefits which have kicked in, are you looking at retiring debt at a significantly more pace than what you earlier had indicated?
So when we started off 3-4 years back, we had said minimum $1 billion a year. Obviously, we are doing much better than that. We did much better than that last year, and we'll do much better than that this year. We've already done almost $2 billion in the first 6 months. So we are going quite strong on that. I think the guidance we're giving is our net debt to EBITDA will be less than 1 by the end of the year. We were, if you remember, we were at 4 or 5 levels a few years back. So at less than 1, I think we are extremely comfortable.
तो टाटा स्टील के मैनेजमेंट से नतीजे पर बातचीत हो रही थी और मैनेजमेंट काफ़ी कॉन्फिडेंट साउंड कर रहा है और ये उम्मीद जता रहा है कि आगे जाकर वॉल्यूम में और सुधार देखने को मिलेगी। मुनाफे में मल्टीफोल्ड जंप है, 8 गुने के आसपास का उछाल आया है। हालांकि आज जब शेयर खुला इन नतीजों के बाद तो ऊपर खुला था, लेकिन ऊपरी स्तरों से प्रेशर आ गया और देखिए बाजार अब ऊपर जा रहा है, लेकिन शेयर है दिन के निचले स्तरों के आसपास।